Hello, my name is Karen Burton, and my passion is knitting prayer shawls. I first became interested in knitting when I was about 10 years old. My mom taught me how to knit the basic knitting stitch, which is the garter stitch. The first project that I ever worked on was a scarf that I made for a project for Campfire Girls. I first learned about prayer shawls from my minister, Pastor Amy Aiken. I attended a book study that she was leading, and there was a woman that was there in the book study, and her name is Sandy. And Amy had told the group that Sandy was in the process of making a prayer shawl for her, and she asked the other members of the book study, did any of them know how to knit or crochet? I asked Sandy how she found out about making a prayer shawl, and she suggested that I go to a website which is shawlministry.com. The Prayer Shawl Ministry started in 1998 by two ladies who wrote this book, The Prayer Shawl Companion, and in the book they had different patterns and suggestions on how to start a prayer shawl ministry in your church, different information about prayer shawls. A prayer shawl is kind of like a wrap or a shawl that someone would wear in worship, or they're given as gifts sometimes to people who are going through difficult events in their lives or happy events such as a wedding, the birth of a child, being ordained as a minister. I got the instructions to make a prayer shawl from the Shawl Ministry website, which is shawlministry.com. I start a prayer shawl by casting on 60 stitches onto my circular needles. Casting on is when you put the yarn on the needles to start a project. The significance of 60 is that prayer shawl should be, the number of stitches should be divisible by 3. And the symbolism of that is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. When I make my prayer shawls, I prefer to use what they call the stockinette stitch, which is knitting the first row, purling the second row, and then you continue to do it back and forth until you finish the prayer shawl. The colors that I prefer to use on my prayer shawls should be warm and beautiful colors. There's a symbolism to the colors that you use on your prayer shawl. For instance, the color red symbolizes love, passion, and courage. If you go to the Shawl Ministry website, there is a list of all the colors and what each of those colors symbolize. The yarn that I prefer to use is called Lion Brand homespun yarn. It's a very soft yarn and it comes in some very beautiful and warm colors. I particularly like the wave that the yarn has in it because it makes the finished prayer shawl look very pretty. The store that I prefer to purchase my prayer shawl yarn is at Michael's. However, sometimes I do go online and purchase it online if I can find it a little less expensive. After I finish the prayer shawl, I take it to my church and I give it to my pastor, Amy. She then will give it a blessing and will distribute it to somebody in the congregation. I did make a special prayer shawl about 3 years ago. I called it the traveling prayer shawl. It was made up of yarn remnants that I had from other projects that I had made in the past. I decided to knit one continuous prayer shawl of different colors of yarn. At the time, I went ahead and took it to my church and I had Pastor Amy bless it. The next day, I took it and mailed it to a friend of mine in West Virginia that's a Methodist minister, along with an empty journal. And in the journal, it had the Facebook page where if somebody received the prayer shawl, they could make notes on Facebook about their experience with the prayer shawl. I will continue to make prayer shawls in the future. Also in the future, I intend on continuing to knit caps for an organization called Knots of Love. They collect knitted and crocheted caps for cancer patients, and they're distributed to cancer treatment centers all over the country. In addition to that, I also knit beautiful and unique scarves that I'm going to be selling in an online boutique.